Hello and welcome to the online edition of the History to Schools program relating to maps and planning. This is normally something that we offer to our second grade students when they come to visit us each spring here at Anderson Center. Unfortunately, with the virtual schooling that's going on, remote learning, we're doing our best to try to take this as an opportunity to reach back out to students to provide this to them. And we hope you'll enjoy. We're going to kind of walk quickly through a little bit of our planning and zoning department, talk about maps, and then do a little history tour around each of our 6 elementary schools. Township, our planning and zoning department, is the one that primarily uses maps as their tool to help do their job every day. The planning and zoning department, as you see by the name, is responsible for planning, and what we mean by that is where things might be built or not built in the community, different rules or regulations that might be in place for how far things can be from properties, how tall they can be, those types of things. They all would fit into our planning and zoning department. They also regulate land uses and how we use the land that we have, because as we all know, we're not making any more land, and so we have to use the land that we have in the best way possible. So this is the department that day in and day out uses our maps. We're going to talk about a couple of those right now. The first is our trails map, and as you can see from your map exercises and learning earlier this year, all the maps that we have all have up here, we've got a title block which tells us what the map is, and this is our trails map from 2018. They all have a legend or a key down here which has different colors and notes that correspond to the map. They also have a scale down here which helps us to measure different distances that are in there. We have a north arrow, so never eat soggy waffles is the term that you might use, or never eat slimy worms, or never enter Santa's workshop. We've heard a lot of them over the years, but north, east, south, and west. So there's the directions that we would have there. Now this is Anderson Township. We're bounded by the Ohio River to the south, the Little Miami River to the north. And if you look on this map, this is a map that we have that shows us where we have built over 20 miles of sidewalks and trails since 1998, and where we'd like to build those in the future. So if we go down to our legend or our key, we'll see that the completed sidewalks here, or existing sidewalks, ones that were built when subdivisions and such were built, are shown in the blue color. So we can kind of see a lot of those through here. We also can see proposed sidewalks and trails that are dashed. And then we also can look at some other things, such as the pink or red areas here. These are all schools across our community. And one of the things that we're very fortunate is that a lot of the sidewalks and trails that we've built in Anderson have been around the schools in our community. They've also been around a number of our parks. And it's done for a couple of reasons. Most importantly is young children like yourselves, you don't have driver's licenses yet, so this gives you a little more independence, particularly as you get older. But it also helps us to connect all of our trails and neighborhoods as well, so that people can easily get to a park or a school or recreation property from their home. This map is a little bit hard to see here on the screen, but we would encourage you to go to our website at andersontownship.org, and you can look at the full map, you can look at the plan and better understand what we might have planned for the future with regards to trails or sidewalks. Another map that we rely on a lot is our land use map. This is a map of Anderson Township again. Everything that's not white on this map is Anderson Township. So the yellow and the blues and the oranges that you see, that's all Anderson Township. And we are a large community, over 32 miles. We stretch from Coney Island down here up all the way to Riverside Park, or where you might go to Gymnastics Central up in this area for some of you. Over here we have Clear Creek Park, kind of the soccer fields and everything, down along Little Miami River, all the way down to Woodland Mound and the Spray Park down in that area. So it's a very large community. Again, you see the Ohio River and the Little Miami River. These white areas, this is the village of Newtown, and we know some of our students here at Forest Hills live in the village. And this is the city of Cincinnati. So this is Mount Washington and the neighborhood of California. So it gives you a little sense. Again, they all have a legend, they all have a title, have a compass over here, or a compass rose. So hopefully those are things that you've talked about in school this year. On this map, you'll see a lot of yellow. If we go down to our key or a legend, you see yellow means single family residence or cluster residence, even this orange, which is transitional, or the brown, which is multifamily. But those are all housing. We have over 17,000 houses in Anderson Township, so it is by far the single biggest land use that we have. We also have some agricultural or farming areas up here around the soccer fields that I just talked about. We have an industrial area over here. in the northeastern part of our community. And then you see a lot of these colors along, this is Beachmont Avenue. So you see a lot of red and blue, which would be retail or office, and same with 5 Mile Road right here. And then you also see these public buildings. So in this map, these schools would be here, like the Mercer Turpin area or Maddox. You begin to see those types of public uses as well on our map. So this is how we determine where we want various things to be built and how things are connected to each other or compatible, how they fit with each other. And land use is a key part of that. So we're going to talk about a few land use categories, the first of which is housing. So beyond single family houses that we talked about, there are some other types as well. In Anderson, we have large and small houses. We have condominiums, townhouses, apartments. So a lot of different housing options would go into that housing category. Next, we have open space and recreation. This would refer to areas like parks, green spaces, golf courses, natural areas. We're very fortunate in Anderson to have over 20% of our community as open space. We also have over 700 acres of green space and hundreds of acres of county and township parks in our own backyard. So we're very fortunate that way, that as we've developed, we've managed to try to balance that with keeping areas green and natural as well for our enjoyment. Public uses, on that one map I spoke to, those were blue on the map, so schools would be some examples, but here are some others. Our Sheriff's Department, if you're watching our videos, you'll see a little tour of that building, or our fire station, that's the Salem Road Station on the bottom right, one of 4 that we have. We also have the Anderson Center, which is where you would be if you're with us today in person, and we sure hope you still come and visit. Our trails are still open and you can walk around the lake, but our building is as well in the atrium, and you can hopefully sooner than later we'll be able to get you in the history room and other parts of the building if you haven't done that already. And then our recycling drop-off area in the bottom left. But there are other public type of uses. These are generally owned by either the government or public groups that are available for people to go into. Examples of that in our community would be the post office, the library would be that, the hospital would be. Another one might be churches, a lot of churches that are accessible to the community as well. So those are all public uses across our community. Retail. Now on our map, I talked about this was the red category if you went back to that. A lot of this is found along Beachmont Avenue, but we also have some smaller areas of the community as well that are retail. Those would be places like the Anderson Town Center, grocery stores, Target, Kroger, etc. Restaurants would be that. So a lot of different retail opportunities that we have in our community, and those would all fit into mainly higher traveled areas. Beachmont Avenue, Salem Road, Clough, where there's a lot of cars that go by, we often find retail activities. Some retail activities might be considered attractions, and we're very fortunate as well to have a lot of these in our community, particularly down along the Ohio River. Let's take a look at these. Maybe familiar to you. So Sunlight Pool, the world's largest recirculating pool right here in Anderson Township in our own backyard. The Riverbend Music Center for concerts. Belterra Park, which has restaurants and gaming and horse racing. So all different attractions. We have these clustered down along Kellogg Road and what we call our Kellogg Avenue, our entertainment district, right along the Ohio River. So that's an example in another portion of our community of land uses. Now's a time when we shift over and talk a little bit about how all these maps were made. And we're going to walk you through using Mercer Elementary as an example, but we're going to touch on all 6 of our elementary schools and give you the same kind of tour. At any point in time, please stop this. You can maybe try to find your house or look at some features, but these might be pretty cool things to look at how the area around your schools has changed. Let's start with Air. This is where Air Elementary is today. Of course, it wasn't there back in 1956, over 60 years ago. If you look at this map, that's the area, and you see a lot of green in there and dots. I think those are probably trees, right? The white areas right here, those were roadways. So this was 8 Mile Road and Forest Road right here. Over here we have Nordike Road and Woodruff. So you begin to see the roadways. You see these little dots along those. Those are houses that were being built, or farms. And speaking of farms, we have some orchards. You see the dots up here where there's some trees that are planted in rows. We also have some just farm fields that are in that area as well. Back in 1956, our maps were in black and white, and they took these from airplanes. Today, we've evolved. Our first aerials actually were probably taken from hot air balloons. Later on, planes became most popular, certainly helicopters, and ultimately we get into satellites, which we see today, like with Google Earth and other things. Let's fast forward. This is 1975, 20 years later, and you see air has just been built. You also see a lot more houses and subdivisions. This is what's known as the Brittany Acres area, Pamela Drive. You see the beginnings of some possible trails, which is what will be Veterans Park right next door to you. And you see this big road right here, Interstate 275, that was built in the early 1970s. Something that really wasn't there back in the 50s, certainly. Shift forward another 25 years to 2001. The big change here, of course, is color. And we had a lot more technology at that point in time, but you see the area around air really has gone from a rural environment to a suburban environment. A lot more houses, neighborhoods, you may even find your house on here or your apartment. You see Veterans Park right next door to you that way to the east. You also see the subdivisions going off of Forest Road, even more that are being built that way. So it gives you a sense, and then we'll go on to 2017, and you actually see the new addition from that was built there onto air, the wider roofs. You see some other changes on the property there. And again, these maps are generally flown either in the spring or the fall when there's not leaves on the tree and when there's generally not snow on the ground. Usually the brighter greens you can probably assume are spring. Darker green might be when things have fallen in the fall. But again, most of the ones we're going to show you today are probably spring photos. So that's a little history on air. Let's now look at Maddox. This is where Maddox was built, not back in 1938 when this aerial was taken. Back in 1938, you see Salem Road right here. You see Beachmont, a two-lane road at the time. Over here we see Bernie Lane and Markley Road. Maddox was a farm field, and a lot of that area was farm fields. A lot of that area was known as Fruit Hill. A lot of farm items were packaged up and on train tracks down to other markets here in our area. But even in the Maddox, like we saw at Air, you see orchards, you see farm fields. Very rural environment here in the 1930s. We fast forward to the 1960s, and you see Maddox was recently built. You probably see the lighter area. That's probably dirt that's still on the ground. You see expansion of some of the neighborhoods, some other neighborhoods that were built, but a lot more houses at that point in time. We also see some ball fields. This was Beach Acres Park before it is what it is today, but there were some baseball fields that were there. You see some subdivision areas that are being built, and you actually see a lot more trees. So as the subdivisions have come, more trees have been planted, and we'll see that even more in the next slide. In 2001, so just about 20 years ago, again, this is probably a springtime shot, but a lot of trees, a lot of those wooded areas were kept or reestablished after subdivisions were built. But this really is a suburban environment at this point in time. We've gone from rural to suburban pretty quick. You see kind of the school building as it was laid out prior to the changes, and then when we go to 2017, you'll see the changes with the addition onto Maddox. You'll see the new parking area. You actually looked up the Beach Acres, and you see what you see today with the skate park, all of which certainly wasn't there 20 years ago. So maps, we build our maps from these aerials, but these aerials tell us a lot about our history, and they also are really helpful for us to plan for the future. We'll shift over to Maddox now. I'm sorry, Mercer, I should say. For Mercer, so we see Bartles Road right here. We see Newtown Road and Clough Pike. Again, 1938, Anderson was very much a farming community. As you can see here, a lot of the trees were removed. Those areas that could be farmed were farmed. We go to 1956, and we start to see some development. We start to see some development here in Mount Washington, a lot of development in Mount Washington in the city of Cincinnati. Even in 1956, just the beginning of construction in the Turpin Hills area, but not a lot of development in the area where Mercer is located today. We fast forward to 2001, and my, what a change. You see most of Turpin Hills has developed at that point in time. A lot of the subdivisions, Royal Green, a lot of development up here in Treetops off of Lawyer Road. You also see both the schools are there, Mercer and Turpin, which opened up in the 1970s. So dramatic changes from the 1970s to 2001 in this area. You see a new subdivision, the Turpin View area that was starting to be built at the time. And then when we go to 2017, you'll see certainly the completion of those. You see the construction activity going on in both the areas up in that vicinity. So again, dramatic change certainly in the Mercer area in the last 70 years. Sherwood, we haven't forgot about you. Here we go now. So Sherwood Elementary, again, this is State Road. As it winds itself in, this is Bridges Road that goes down. You see Old 5 Mile heading down that way, and Clough kind of meandering its way along the creek there. Again, very similar picture, farmlands, some orchards, few houses being built, a couple subdivisions starting to be constructed. This was in 1956, so just over 60 years ago. By 1975, 20 years later, a dramatic change of when, by that point, Sherwood was built and operational. The Sherwood forest area, the subdivision around there, dramatic changes with the development of Sherwood. And Anderson's boom during the 1950s and 60s and 70s is really seen through this picture. You also see over here the beginning of construction of the 5 Mile Road area. 5 Mile wasn't there at that point in time. This is the area where the Commons of Anderson was built, and you begin to see some of the dirt from the Anderson Town Center, which used to be called the Beachmont Mall, which was built in the early 70s as well. So you see other aspects of our community starting to take shape. By 2001, a lot of those are in place. So you begin to see the hospital, which wasn't there, the library, the healthplex. Most of the area around Sherwood was developed at that point in time. Condominium developments over here. So really a lot of development in Sherwood was in that last 25 years or so of the last century. And then you begin to see down the bottom here, and I'll show you this last image for Sherwood, the Anderson Town Center and Anderson Center area. So when I click forward, you'll see the construction of Anderson Center, Anderson Lake, the park and ride, and other amenities in that area. 2 more to go. We'll head over to the Summit and Summit Estates. So this was Summit in 1938, over 80 years ago. You begin to see, this is 8 Mile Road, Beachmont Avenue, a sleepy little 2-lane road. This is about where Summit was. You also see a railroad track that went through. And there's actually the Nighthawks Express. When you move on to Nagel, you'll see perhaps some references to where the train tracks actually went right through the Nagel property as well. Again, that was the way in this area, Cherry Grove as it was known, the way farm products were transported to other parts of our region or our city. But very rural, a lot of orchards in this area, as you can see from the dots on the map, the trees, and very much a farming area. Very few trees in 1938. By 1968, a dramatic change. 30 years later, you see some more trees that have begun to grow in along our creeks and streams. Summit, of course, is built. Summit Estates subdivision, which started construction in the 50s, is full underway. Portions of it, you can see there's still portions mainly to the north, the Holiday Hills area and such, that weren't quite developed yet. Certainly Nagel wasn't developed. So again, a lot of change to come, but Anderson was really a growing suburban community at that point in time. And you begin to see some larger stores down here along Beachmont Avenue. This would be where Kroger is today in Cherry Grove. This is the Target site, kind of hard to see. But you begin to see those taking shape. By 2001, another 30 years later, you see those. This is the Target rooftop and Staples complex down here. You see Nagel Middle School was built in the late 90s. A lot of change on Beachmont as well, and complete build out almost of the Summit Estates area and the Julius Park area as well. So when we go to 2017, with the exception of construction around your school, which you kind of see the dirt being moved here, most of what is here existed back in 2000 as well. A few small changes, mainly up along Clough in a few areas, but by and large looks very similar. Our last school was Wilson Elementary. Again, this is the Wilson Elementary area in 1938, so it's kind of hard to piece the maps together here. That's actually what they did back in that time. But this is Lawyer Road, Wolfangle Road, Little Dry Run, and Hunley across the front. Again, very much a farming area. You do have some natural spaces. This is the Hermitage Club down off of Raglan Road, coming out of the village of Newtown, but mainly farming up on top of the hill there. We go to 1968, and you see a lot more trees taking shape, fortunately. You do see the roads a little more pronounced at this point in time. Some subdivisions beginning to be built, Heatherwood and places like that. You've got Cathedral Hill down here, but still pretty rural. And even in 1968, as Wilson, this is about when Wilson was almost 10 years old at that point in time. We fast forward to the 2001. Besides the color changes that we see here, we see a dramatic suburbanization. A lot of development around Wilson was going on that time and continues. A lot of trees, very pronounced that you see. Something you see down here that's not here yet is the 5-mile trail. 5-mile road ended at Clough Pike right here. You also don't see the Eagles Watch neighborhood over in this area, which still in 2001 was farmed by the family there. When we fast forward to 2017, see a lot of changes. You see the development here of Eagles Watch almost fully completed. You see the 5-mile trail meandering. You see some other subdivisions as well. You see development at Wilson. This is a great photo because you see Old Wilson and New Wilson right there on top of each other right before the school was completed and the prior school was removed. But you begin to get a sense of those changes and how we might plan for the future. We really appreciate you joining us this morning. We hope you all are doing well. If ever you have other questions, feel free to call us or email us. We'll be happy to try to give you more information and tell you a little bit about our story and what's in store for the future, and really appreciate all the work that you all are doing to finish up the school year and your families as well. So take care. Thank you.